Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a special joint pre-recorded interview with myself, Vinny Eastwood of the VinnyEastwoodShow.com, and the lovely Susanne Posel of OccupyCorporatism.com. We are doing this recording in a kind of a nervous and I don't know what else to do sort of state. The subject of the broadcast is Pete Santilli of the Pete Santilli Show, and the complications that have arisen between Pete Santilli, myself, and Susanne Posel with regard to the recent setup of guerrilla media. So let's just refer back to our notes that we've got here. I think we're going to have him to begin. Right, Susanne knows Pete a hell of a lot more than I do. She'd been on his show many times, and personally I had started up Guerrilla Media about 2007 or so, and I've been running guerrillamedia.co.nz for some time on these kind of base principles, of which I like to call the Guerrilla Media core principles. Which were to basically just not engage in scumbaggery. There's a whole list of them, and they're on the current website which we've got up. They're real at realguerrillamedia.com. So all the principles are up there for people to check out for themselves. Now, after Pete saw the name Guerrilla Media, he very quickly bought up a raft of Guerrilla Media website names, and we then started to have these conference calls, consulting with me and Susanne Posel and Susanna Cole on these conference calls, coming up with the, well, me rather, coming up with the ideas for how to run it, how we want it to work, what the core principles are, this kind of thing. And it was during a incident that he had with a Mr. Jim Fetzer, where Pete actually acknowledges that the interview that he conducted with Jim Fetzer was an absolute train wreck. He was constantly interrupting him, and he did something which I thought was pretty horrific, where he recorded the breaks, when you go off air, ladies and gentlemen, and you're on a break, you can say whatever you want, and that's totally off the record. Okay, that's as far as I operate. That's as far as everybody operates. Pete didn't do that with Jim Fetzer. On the other hand, he recorded those in between the break chats and also published them on his YouTube version of his radio broadcast there, which was just totally out of line, regardless of what you feel about Jim Fetzer. To record somebody, having them not know that it's going to be recorded and published, especially outside of the normal parameters of a radio show format, when somebody's guard is down, that's really dishonourable. Susanne, do you have anything there to offer about the Jim Fetzer interview before we go, or any other prefacing to this?
I called Pete after I heard it and asked him, what's up? Are you okay? What's going on? That's completely... You could have had the person on the show. He knew the whole thing was set up by Dr. Judy Wood. She runs everything from behind the scenes. She's on a Skype chat with Pete during the broadcast, telling him what to say it, how to direct questions, basically the puppet master of the show. And this has been going on for a while. And so when the Fetzer interview happened, I asked him, are you okay? What's going on? Because you have somebody on your show and you let them talk. You don't attack them. But the Fetzer interview was Judy Wood considers him an enemy of hers. So he decided to go after her enemy. And, in Pete's way, which is to attack people. And so it was all a show. And he repeated things that that Judy Wood told him to repeat. And I know because I had spoken with her on calls with him, 2 calls before that even happened. And that was, you know, he was preparing for the interview, and they just briefly mentioned it. So I knew that when I heard what he was saying, I knew some of those words were actually hers.
Okay.
And, okay.
No, is there an and? Keep going.
No, I'm sorry. Yes, I'll stop.
All right. Okay, so Judy Wood involvement behind the scenes, and there was a conference call that we had where I believe for about 45 minutes I was lamenting my personal interaction with Judy Wood. There was an incident whereby she was supposed to be coming on my show on September 11th, the United States September 11th, and I'd accidentally made a bit of an error call, and she thought she was going to be on September 12th. And I apologised and said, I'm sorry, I have another guest today. And she kept repeating over and over, like copy-pasting my email to me 3 times in the Skype chat, saying, this is what you said, this is what you said, this is what you said. Not wanting to resolve anything, not wanting to, basically act like a human being. And because I was apologetic and saying, okay, well, we can reschedule, or we can record something really quickly right now because it's 45 minutes till showtime. And then she just reposts that email again with the scheduled time. It's the day after 9/11, so obviously she's been working her butt off for the last couple of days. And I asked her, are you tired? You know, out of genuine concern. And she says, I'm done. And I haven't heard from her since. I did get an email from a colleague of hers, Connie Berry, berating me and saying that I'm a completely unprofessional radio show host, and I will never work in this business again, and I'll never get Jesse Ventura on my show, who he knows personally, allegedly. This whole shitstorm for no fucking reason. Okay, that's Judy Wood. And it was good for me to find out at that early stage. I'd had her on my show a number of times. We'd had a relationship. The very first time to have her on the show, I had to coax her for 2 hours, you know, trying to get her to sort of bring her guard down a bit, to sort of trust me, so that I could even just bring her on the broadcast at all. And it didn't matter the fact that after she said, I'm done, I said, look, I can kick off my current guest, James Wright, and bring you on right now as scheduled. No worries, you know, that kind of thing. Nothing. And so I was trying to explain to Pete that dynamic that I had between her, and he obviously didn't take much heed. Anyway, onto the concept of guerrilla media. Is it mine? It's my concept. It's not a trademarked name or anything, but the concept of guerrilla media is to get a bunch of eclectic activists, you know, for free. You know, they're all working for free anyway. Give them some free coverage on the website, aggregate their articles and things of that nature, and also help to solicit donations from visitors to guerrilla media for these particular activists, so that they can earn an income off of the apparatus and off of the work that they do. Because often in this kind of industry, people are far more likely to donate to you and give you financial aid that way than they are to buy a product. Ironically enough, they'd rather have nothing and give you something than buy something and give you a little bit of something. You know what I'm saying? That was quite interesting. Okay, and the conversation progressed, and I wanted to be explicitly, you know, the front man of guerrilla media, and Pete fully agreed with everything I said, and that kind of thing, and we were going to come up with these instructional videos of how to teach people how to make their videos, how to do their radio shows, how to write their blog posts, and things of that nature. Just instructions, how to use the website, and what have you. And then there was another incident following the Fetzer interview on American Freedom Radio. And Suzanne, you know more about this than I do, if you would elucidate, unless you want to flesh out anything I've said so far as well.
No, I'll go into the I was on the after show with Pete and Susanna, and one of his listeners was in the Skype chat and said that James Fetzer was on Kevin Barrett's show, and they were talking smack about Pete. So Pete immediately put the broadcast through, so I listened to it. And Pete called into the show to trash it. He was claiming that he brought Fetzer on and treated him with respect, and Fetzer was, obviously, and Fetzer was very animated, and he was getting loud, because he was on a show, and Kevin Barrett and he were talking about what his experience was on Pete's show, and Fetzer wasn't saying anything that wasn't true. Pete was attacking him the entire show, and then just started screaming at him and yelling over him and wouldn't let him talk. And so Pete called in and tried to make a case for himself. And then he had his associate producer, Ashley Jones, call in. And then a couple of other Pete regulars called in. And the whole show became, why is everybody attacking Pete? Pete's, exposing 9/11 truth and yada, yada, yada.
And after that, Danny Romero, who is a Salt of the Earth character, a former producer of Alex Jones, and he's a former for a reason, fired Pete Santilli. Pete Santilli is a former Marine, and he signs every email that goes out with Semper Fi, short for Semper Fidelis, which means always loyal. And so I coined the phrase, Pete Santilli got Semper fired from AFR. And allegedly, Suzanne, he called back and quit, didn't he?
He emailed him back. He sent me the email that morning, when I woke up. I think Danny sent it in the middle of the night, but Pete sent it to me, and so I opened it and read it, and my heart was like pounding, because Danny was being very gracious. He told him that he had to go on suspension because of what he did. But he liked Pete, and he wanted Pete to calm down. And Danny had told Pete several times that he needed to calm down. In fact, later on that day, Danny called me to talk to me about it. And he was worried that I was going to leave AFR too. And Danny and I talked for like 3 hours about this. And he genuinely felt upset. Not only that he had to do that, but that Pete was taking it so badly, because Pete wrote him back and rejected his suspension and quit. And then Pete was like he got out the cross and climbed on it and nailed himself to it. But Danny actually feels really bad, even to this day. I've spoken to Danny a couple of days ago, and he still brings it up. He really genuinely feels bad because Pete has all these potentials, but he's using it for something other than what it's intended for, what this movement is intended for. So, yeah.
Now, the following day, without contacting me, in fact, I didn't find out from Pete anything about this until weeks afterwards. He had launched Guerrilla Media the very next day, and I didn't find out about it until about a week or two afterwards. He had contacted me once on Skype with 2 sentences and asked me to contact him back. And I had heard, without Pete Santilli telling me, of course, that he'd been fired. And I had a conference call with Danny Romero and my producer, Mitch. My producer was in tears, talking with Danny Romero over at a separate point about how Pete Santilli was taking Guerrilla Media off me, and how he was really upset. And this was before Pete even launched it. This was after him just taking these websites, guerrillamedianetwork.com and so forth. I think he bought like a dozen websites or so.
Mm-hmm. He did, and the misspellings.
And the misspellings. So, the very next day, he launched Guerrilla Media, and I think your husband, Dave, helped him set up the site, didn't he?
He did. We thought that you were still on board. As far as I was concerned, I'd been on the 2 conference calls that we had, and we had all spoken, and I figured you were on board. So my husband put up the website, loaded it up, and got the template for him, and started to help him with graphics. And at that time, Pete started using that graphic of the gentleman sitting on top of the world with the megaphone talking on the cell phone. And that's what you sent us during one of our conference calls. That was going to be the Guerrilla Media icon.
Yeah. And I'd instructed Pete, of course, quickly, start using that logo and that kind of things, because I thought we were going to be going straight ahead with all this.
Mm-hmm.
And it was after a conversation with Danny Romero where he showed me the email Pete had sent him back, accusing Danny of misleading people in terms of, because American Freedom Radio is about no taboo topics and things of that nature, and Pete felt betrayed and what have you, and it was just kind of, he was playing the blame game essentially. And as he was reading out this email to me, sentence after sentence, line after line, point after point, I was just like, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. Like everything that Pete was saying would just seemed like absolute utter bullshit narcissism to me anyway. And I was quite perturbed by that. I've been involved with psychos and narcissists and things before in my previous days as an activist, and it scared the fuck out of me completely. And I never wanted to talk to this man again, and I still have not yet today. So when he messaged me about a week later asking me to get back in contact with him, I did not reply. Now, Susanne, he told you about this, didn't he?
Yeah, he told me that, because I asked him, since he was launching it, what happened to Vinny? What's going on? And he said that he had called you and left you a voice message, and that you never called him back.
No such voice message. There was 2 sentences on a Skype chat, but that was it. Which I didn't reply to. So he could have persisted and maybe forced a response from me, but I'm not sure if I would have ever replied. I mean, I don't even want to be doing this broadcast right now, but after a conversation with a listener on Facebook last night, he told me, and I happen to agree with him, that until we get this off our chests, or in Suzanne's case, breasts, we'll never be free of this shit. So that was kind of what this broadcast is about, and we don't even know if we're even going to publish it after it's done. Okay, so we had that conversation with Pete. I mean, prior to him being fired about the Jim Fetzer thing and what have you, and what was the next thing set up here? Okay, after this all incident happened, being fired from AFR and doing that kind of thing, he then started bringing people onto Guerrilla Media and approving members themselves, whereas we'd previously agreed to act as a council on this, so that everybody would know who's coming on board and meet approval standards and things of this nature. And after that, we're going to note down here, he embarrassed you, Suzanne, on the show. What was there?
Yeah, I called him after the Fetzer interview and asked him, are you okay? What's going on? And then the next time I appeared on his show, because I was coming on every day, 6 days a week, doing the Bunker News Break, and he said to his audience that I had called him to see if he was okay, and made it out to be something it wasn't. I specifically told him that the Fetzer interview was inappropriate, and if that's what he was going to do to people, he needed to stop and think about what he was doing. If you're going to have someone on and you know that they're adversarial, you should at least let them talk. If you don't agree with somebody, and his point was to expose him as a COINTELPRO psyop for the 9/11 Truth Movement. And I figured, well, if you're going to prove that someone is a psyop, why don't you just let them talk? If they're a psyop, you'll hear it. People, once they get comfortable and they start talking openly, they usually give themselves away. So you should just let someone talk. And then the next day on the show, he made a comment about the phone call, and he made it sound like I was calling him to encourage him about his call to Fetzer and what a great job he did. And I was sitting there on the air, and I'm not going to be rude to somebody on their own show. It's like coming into someone's house and they cook you your favorite meal and you tell them, well, it doesn't taste as good as whatever. So I just brushed it off and laughed about it. But when I got off the air, I thought, why would you do that? And then he started being very rude on the show. Are you done? Are you done yet? Is that it? Is that all you have? Do I have to comment on this? I'm busy doing something else. And so I felt like, why am I even coming on his show? What's going on? And then he brought on Rocket, launched Guerrilla Media, brought on Rocket, and I said to him, what are you doing? That's when I realized you weren't involved.
And Rocket allegedly had a meltdown or something on the air?
Yeah, it was about 2 or 3 nights ago. I was on Facebook, and a couple of Pete's listeners messaged me on Facebook and tell me about what he's saying. That's why I found out that he was talking about me on the air without saying my name. And so I would tune into the broadcast and listen. And so this person told me that Rocket had a meltdown, was cussing out a caller, literally had like a mental breakdown on the air. And so Judy Wood called in to calm him down and encourage him to keep going with the show, which I thought was ridiculous because this woman is paranoid. She's got like a borderline personality disorder. What is she doing talking this guy down? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like the moron talking the idiot down.
Yeah.
It just showed me that Guerrilla Media, one of the things that I like about Guerrilla Media is that people who are honest and trying to get out real information and not being sensationalists have a place, finally have a voice. And they can all come together and collaborate. This person, Rocket, is not Guerrilla Media material. He's just somebody that Pete wanted to have on his network because he needed filler.
Okay. Now, after that incident, when was it that you actually broke with Pete?
I called him on a Sunday. I think it was like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And my husband and I talked about it for a while, and I know Pete, and he's very vindictive. And I didn't want him to, go on the air and talk shit about me. So I told him that my husband had gone, well, previous to this, my husband had gone to work part-time for the working outside the home, and it cut into our finances, and then part-time for Guerrilla Media and for my website. So I told Pete that, because of financial circumstances, my husband had to go back to work full-time, which was not true. But it was a story I had to say to him because after talking with my husband about breaking off with him, I had to tell him something to keep him off guard, because if I told him what was really going on, he was going to come after me on his show. And a lot of people who got to know me were from Pete's show. And I was worried about not being able to retaliate. I didn't want to waste my time on AFR bringing this up, and I wasn't going to write an article about it. So as far as everybody knew, I was silent and quiet. And then, so Pete gave this bogus story on the air, and people started emailing me and asking me what was going on. And I told them why I left. I told them what he had done to you. And then I told Susanne in a Skype chat to take down my name and my picture off of the Guerrilla Media site. And she immediately called me. And I knew that this was damage control. So she said that Pete should be on the phone. So this was February 14th. And he called me and, said that he had heard that, I didn't want to be part of this, and that I had hurt him personally, that I had fucked him over because now he's stuck with Guerrilla Media. No matter what he does, he has to use this Guerrilla Media website and all that, and he spent all this money setting up Guerrilla Media, and how could I screw him over like this? And this is personal. And and then he became belligerent, and it sounded like he slammed his fist down on his desk and kicked a file cabinet, one of those metal file cabinets. And then he started cussing me out, calling me a bitch and a cunt over and over again too, not just once. Telling me how I destroyed him, and if I ever said anything on the air or wrote an article or mentioned his name or said anything disparaging, that he would ruin my career. Um, and kept calling me a cunt and a cunt and a bitch, and that he wanted me to die a horrible death, that people like me deserve to burn in hell and die. And I said, well, is there anything else you want to say to incriminate yourself? Because when we opened up the call, I told him that it was being recorded, hoping that he would have some sort of sense of decorum. But he didn't. He just completely lost it. And Susanna was on the call, and she was hysterically crying the whole time. You just hear her crying. She didn't say anything. And then he said he was never going to talk about me on the air, and never mention my name, and he expected me to do the same. And if I didn't, that he would ruin my career. And then he sent me an email after we hung up and said the same thing. He said, this is over unless you do something stupid.
I think we're doing something stupid right now then, aren't we?
Well, that's his way. He's a big friggin' bully, and he thinks that he can intimidate me. He should know me better than that.
Yeah, I mean, the whole reason why we're doing this, and we kind of just did this on the fly, didn't we, Susanne? It was just like, we need to do this, and we're just like, well, why don't we do it now? Okay, let's do it now. It was because of the fact that we don't like bullies. And more to the point, I made the point earlier that when you've got a job and your boss is an asshole and you really hate him, but you have to bite your tongue, that's something that eats you away every single day that you have to go back to that job. And every single thing your boss says eats you away even more and more. I'm tired of being eaten away. Okay, I need to say what I feel, because I can't live like this, essentially. Like, it's actually been weighing on my mind. I mean, you've seen how I've been, Susanne. I mean, even on so much on the show today, I was really upset, and it's because these guys from No Messiah, who, like, the band that Pete plays on his show, calling me a retard and a dumbass and this kind of shit, just really fucked me off to no end, and I really can't handle it. Like, I'm a very sensitive guy, and that's the reason why I've got so much empathy for other people, but it also means that I really feel people's negativity. I really feel it. I don't like that sensation whatsoever. And so this recording that we're doing now is more of a therapy at the very least, and at the most, just clearing the air, letting people know the real truth behind this guerrilla media, Pete Santilli, Suzanne Posel, Vinny Eastwood situation, for those who are curious.
Right.
Now, on his show last week, there was also a mention of you, something about being dragged into the street.
Yeah, one of his listeners in the chat said something about me, asking about what happened. Because a lot of his listeners were emailing me and messaging me on Facebook. And I was telling him, I started telling him from the time that I told him I couldn't be on the show anymore. And after the phone call, I just said, fuck it. They need to know what's going on. So I told them. And a lot of them told me that I was the only reason why they listened to the show, that I brought a semblance of professionalism to the show, because it's just it's like going to the zoo and looking at the monkeys, and what was interesting is everyone I spoke to about this through emails and messages on Facebook, everyone said the same thing. They all said, I knew something wasn't right about him, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but now what you're telling me makes absolute sense, and I'm never going to listen to him again. Everyone said that.
And that even includes a fellow host, Charlie McGrath from the Rents Network, doesn't it?
Yeah, when I was on Charlie McGrath's show, someone in his chat room asked about Pete Santilli. And my husband message in Skype that we're no longer affiliated with him. And it was brought onto the show. It was during the break, and Charlie McGrath had tried to be a guest on his show, but there were technical difficulties, and Pete asked him to come back on, and Charlie said he had a really bad feeling about Pete, and so he never came back on the show. And after I told him briefly what he did to you and what he did to Guerrilla Media and what he did to me, he said the same thing. I knew it. I knew there was something not right about that guy. That's interesting to me, that everyone says this.
It is interesting, isn't it? Now, the term Stockholm Syndrome comes to mind, and you were referenced earlier that Susanne Cole was in tears on this conversation where Pete was cussing you out, calling you a cunt and a bitch, and so on and so forth, and yet she's still totally behind him, isn't she?
Yeah, they have a romantic relationship beyond the show, which is interesting because he's still married, and his wife and he live together. They're not estranged. I don't know what's going on in the house. You know, some people just stay out of each other's way, and I don't know what's going on. But Pete went on a 3-week cruise to Italy, and he was seen in pictures with his wife. In fact, his wife put up pictures of the cruise together, and they were standing together, holding each other, hugging, sipping a glass of wine, and he had his wedding ring on in one of those pictures. So it's quite, it's safe to say that whatever he's doing with Susanna is manipulative. And she's 26, or she just turned 27, and she's very impressionable. And even though she's a very bright, intelligent, very caring person, I do say that because she and I struck up a friendship. But she knows that he's married. Even the wife called her and text messaged her, and she called me in tears about this because we had a friendship beyond working together. And then I did some research on him and found out that everything he talks about is a lie. Even his service in the Marine Corps is a lie. What he did at Coca-Cola is a lie. Everything about him is a lie. But she stays with him. She says that she put so much work and energy into the show for the last year, and she doesn't want to give that up. But like you said, it's like the battered wife syndrome.
Well, it's hard to give up something, especially when you put a whole lot of work into it, and it's more akin to what I'd call problem relationship gambling. Okay, you put so many coins into this slot machine, and you just hope one day it's going to pay off. One day it's going to pay off, and before you know it, you're broke as motherfucker.
Yes. Yes.
Now, they mentioned you on his radio broadcast that you'd be dragged into the street and shot, that you don't have the guts in this movement and things like this, and you know, it's just we've sent him a cease and desist letter outlining the guerrilla media principles that he's broken. And in fact, I think we're coming towards the end of this. I feel better already, but I think what we really need to do is actually read out that letter that we sent off, Pete, so that people know the lawful kind of situation here in terms of what Pete has been asked to do, considering he's using intellectual property, which is mine. The concepts behind guerrilla media, the guerrilla media principles, things of that nature. Is there anything else you've left out before we read out this letter here?
No.
No. Okay. Well, we're pretty well covering it, I think. Okay, so to Peter T. Santilli, excuse me, RE Guerrilla Media, aka Guerrilla Media Network. You are in violation of the core principles of Guerrilla Media effective January 28th, 2013. You launched Guerrilla Media Network on your internet show, The Pete Santilli Show, without the express consent or knowledge of the other founding members. The core principles you have violated are core principle 6, practice good interpersonal communication. Core principle 11, be transparent, avoid secrecy and covert activity between ourselves and the audience. Core principle 12, display the network logo on our published work and or posts to signify they have abided by the core principles of Guerrilla Media Network. Core Principle 13, mutually respect each other and treat our audience members with the same level of respect. Number 14, be truthful at all times, as lying is the ultimate crime in journalism. And Section 18, no scumbaggery, meaning dishonesty, physical harm inflicted on others, or theft or damage to private property. This includes intellectual property and people's images, I guess. You have expressed publicly that Guerrilla Media is your own concept and project, as evidenced on your broadcast of the Pete Santilli Show dated January 28th, 2013, wherein you said on air that you are starting the Guerrilla Media Network yourself, creating a media hub for vetted journalists, radio hosts and other members of the alternative media to come to your network. Since the announcement, you have used the concept, intellectual property and graphic artwork originated by Vinny Eastwood 6 years ago without his expressed permission. Because of these violations, the founding members of Guerrilla Media have decided to vote you out of the organisation. We request now that you cease and desist all associations with Guerrilla Media, including but not limited to stop using the name Guerrilla Media and in all of its forms, including the website, graphic artwork displaying the name and references to Guerrilla Media. Stop using the graphic artwork originated by Vinny Eastwood in your YouTube broadcasts. Websites mentioning Guerrilla Media include guerrillamedianetwork.com, petersantilli.com, collapsealert.com, strikethevote.com, beforeitsnews.com, youtube.com, the account Pete Santilli. Pursuant to our rights under the intellectual property laws, the founding members of Guerrilla Media request that you cease and desist all use of the name Guerrilla Media, any graphic artwork associated with the concept and public references to your associations with Guerrilla Media. You are hereby notified that if you do not comply with this request, the founding members of Guerrilla Media will seek action against you to force you to comply. This includes any and all legal remedies afforded by the court system as outlined in the intellectual property rights laws. All civil and criminal action will be pursued. The founding members of Guerrilla Media hereby give you 7 calendar days to comply with this request. Upon receipt of this correspondence, you are expected to meet the requirements outlined in this cease and desist notice. Sincerely, Vinny Eastwood and Susanne Posel. Now, what was his response to this?
My husband emailed it to Pete Santilli, Pete at the Pete Santilli Show, Susanna at the Pete Santilli Show, Susanna Cole's personal email, and also his associate producer Ashley Jones, her email at the Pete Santilli Show, and also her private email. Pete sent me a private message from his email account in all capital letters telling me that I had been banned from his servers and that the email was not received. I did not get an actual bounce back until a couple of minutes later from only Susanna at the Pete Santilli Show and Ashley at the Pete Santilli Show. My husband then went to our one-on-one account, our hosting company, and changed our ISP address, and then emailed him again, and there was no bounce back. There was no, failed to what is it, a mailer Damon response. A couple of days later, my husband got an email from Susanna, Susanna at the Pete Santilli Show, and also Ashley at the Pete Santilli Show, saying that he had been banned from their servers. And so we laughed because in a court of law, that email that he sent from his email address is acknowledgement of receipt. And Susanna should know this because she's a paralegal.
Mm-hmm. Well, where to from here? We don't know. I mean, when is the 7-day period up? It's up today, isn't
Today.
it? Okay.
It was up today. And as far as I know, he's still using it. He has promos for it, people telling other, on his show that they're listening to the Guerrilla Media Network and everything like that.
Okay. And what is your local time right at the moment, Susanna? Oh, Suzanne?
It is 11:20 Pacific Standard Time.
Okay. And it's 8:20 p.m. New Zealand time. This will be February 26th in the United States and February 27th in New Zealand. And he's not yet taken them down. So unfortunately, we're going to have to pursue some sort of legal action. But then of course, there's the other point. Do we want to spend the rest of our lives trying to hunt down Pete Santilli and attack and get him to stop using the Guerrilla Media name and the concept and things like that? Or are we just going to instead work really, really hard to make the real Guerrilla Media, realguerrillamedia.com, bigger and better than you could ever conceive of instead of? Or
well,
both?
I've been headhunting for people. I hate to say it that way, but we have some great people who have already signed on. Charlie McGrath and Karen Tosado and Ron and John over at Canada Live, and Brandon Tuberville, Dan Johnson from Panda Unite, some really great activists that I've come to know that are really wonderful people, Alex Shear and Mikhail Thalen. There are some other musicians that I've contacted, a couple of other radio hosts that are really good people. Jules over at UCY.TV, she has an internet radio station, and James Freeland, I believe he's on the Orion Network, and actually a couple of other people too. Yes, I think we should, what you said, the latter part, absolutely, we should do that. I think that having an attorney send Pete a letter, as opposed to the cease and desist order that we wrote personally, would probably, Pete's a bully, and he's a salesman, and he's all talk, he's all bark and no bite. I think if he got an email or a letter from an actual attorney, that he would probably stop using it. Okay. What is he going to do? In a court of law, we have emails, we have recorded phone calls, we have all the proof we need. He would be stupid. And we should probably send the letter and wait for him, to act on it, because if he was going to bring an action in a court of law, he wouldn't be able to prove his case.
Okay. I don't think really there's a whole lot more to say. And I'm still not sure if I even feel better about this. You know what I'm saying? Because it's still in fucking limbo.
Yeah. Well, we have to make a decision. It's Tuesday. We gave him until today. So we have to decide, are we going to... I know an attorney who will write the letter. And Danny has an attorney who will write a letter too.
Well, that's something that's also occurred to me, is that since this incident, I've had a massive outpouring support, not only from you and David, but also from Danny and my producer Mitch, who actually resigned my show after that Pete Santilli Jim Fetzer interview, and he didn't want to be associated with him whatsoever whilst we were in the midst of guerrilla media negotiations. And what's happened since then is it's really blown me away how much people have shown up to support me through all of this. So I thank you, Suzanne, very much for all of your support. And I think we're going to get that letter typed up, sent away to Pete, and hope that he complies, without causing a massive shitstorm or demonizing the fuck out of us on his radio program. Because thus far he hasn't mentioned me at all on his radio program, to my knowledge.
Right, he hasn't. And I can't guarantee that because he's a hothead. But I do know that a lot of his listeners are not listening to him because of what I said. And I think I know that he's losing listeners. He messaged James Smith over at Pepper Podcast, who had dropped him a long time ago. And after I had an incident with No Messiah, we left when we uploaded one of our broadcasts. We put a disclaimer at the bottom that we were no longer, due to threats and unscrupulous behavior, we were not associated with Pete Santilli or No Messiah any longer. And No Messiah decided to troll my page, and I got attacked throughout the whole show when Pete was on his show. For the 3 hours that he was on there, I was attacked on Facebook and had to ban 5 people in a matter of minutes.
Now, you also had a conversation with this... who's the lead singer from No Messiah? The one who's talking to you about your children or something?
Yeah, his name is Lynx, but on Facebook his name is Daniel Warms. And yeah, he had emailed me and said he didn't want us to use his music, No Messiah's music, anymore, because we had them during the broadcast. And so I messaged him a couple of times on Facebook and wanted to talk to him. And this was on a Saturday. They do the Chaos show where they play music and smoke pot and get drunk and do that for a couple hours. And then he gave me his phone number. Actually, Mikhail, the lead singer, gave me his phone number, and I called, and I didn't realize that they were doing the Chaos show at the moment when I called. And ironically, someone on Facebook messaged me who was listening to the Chaos show, and this was on the back line. And they told me that nasty things were said about me, 4-letter words and 5-letter words, and so they messaged me on Facebook and told me what they heard. And I ended up calling this person on the phone and talking with him, because he's a really nice guy. He's a loyal listener of Pete, and he couldn't believe what he was hearing. So I got in touch with Lynx at No Messiah and spoke to him on the phone and told him. He told me I was crazy. He told me that Pete's doing a wonderful job, and Pete's done more for this movement than anyone else, and all this. And it was just brainwashing. And he says, well, what do you expect to get out of this conversation? I said to him, when everything is exposed and the truth comes out, you'll remember this conversation. I'm having this conversation because then it will click in your head, and you will recall this conversation, and you will know that you're wrong about Pete. And I don't expect you to ever contact me again. I just want you to remember this conversation, because I know you will. And my daughter was throwing a tantrum, so she wanted me to hold her. And he said, can you get your kid away from the phone, because it's really fucking annoying. And I said, I gotta go. My daughter's 2, She just wants to be coddled when she's having a tantrum. It's not a big deal. People who call me personally, and they hear my kids in the background, all the time. And for someone to say something about a 2-year-old, that person is a scumbag. They have no heart. So whatever, go smoke your pot and listen to your Pete Santilli and have a good time with that.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with smoking pot, but there's definitely something wrong with listening to Pete Santilli and sticking up for him. Have you known the truth? So now everybody who I don't know if we're even going to release this, but everybody who has listened to this, you now know the truth about Pete Santilli. And I wanted to add in supplementary here. This is my Facebook status from a couple of days ago. I'm getting sick of people saying that the masses have to awaken. They really don't have to do anything. In all of history, that's what they've always done. Sit on the sidelines while the really good guys and really bad guys duke it out. One side for control over them, and the other to give freedom to those unwilling to fight for it themselves. And here's a comment from Daniel Warms of No Messiah. You are part of the problem. Such a ridiculous statement. Where do I start? And I replied to him by saying, how about you start doing something for humanity, Daniel? I've put more Kiwi activists on air than any other single person in New Zealand history. Who are you to say I'm part of the problem? You can't argue with this statement, and that's why you've decided not to. You're the one who's part of the problem. And he says, this is who I am. Fuck you! and he puts his a plug to his website, nomessiah.net. And I said, fuck you? That's your argument against my statement? And he says, hit the link, dumbass. Maybe you will learn what I've done, and that is my retort. Retard. And I said, I'd rather block you, rude scum. And I blocked him, and I'll never hear from this motherfucker again. Thank God. That's how I deal with people. And then I do block people, you know, I don't know, it's not like every day, but some days, you know, you just can't be bothered putting up with it. And I then put on my Facebook status, just a reminder to trolls and other assorted scum who've lost their manners. Insult me, and you will be blocked. Criticize me, and you will be listened to and taken seriously. Because nothing is worse, and this is the most important part, nothing is worse than a douchebag with a microphone who won't entertain the possibility that he might just be a douchebag with a microphone. If you don't question yourself, and if you don't question others, you may never find out the truth. And more to the point, if you don't reflect and think, you know, am I doing the right thing here? Am I the bad guy? If those questions don't occur to you, then you may very well keep doing the wrong thing. You may very well be the bad guy. That's why I'm constantly questioning myself all the time. And really, that's part of the reason why we did this special recording today here with the lovely Susanne Posel, who, like me, has never screwed over anybody in this movement, and have engaged in this conversation very reluctantly so that people will know the truth at risk to ourselves of repercussions from Pete Santilli and goodness knows how many other trolls may come after us for just telling the truth.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, Susanne, thank you very much for your time. And we will see you again sometime, ladies and gentlemen, at the VinnyEastwoodShow.com and OccupyCorporatism.com and the newly formed Real Guerrilla Media.com. Thank you very much for your attention.